Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining here in person, and thanks everyone for who are joining us online. I hope you all are well as we are facing this unprecedented difficulty due to the coronavirus. So please take extra care. So today, it's truly an honor for me to stand here second time in a row as a speaker. I'm really excited to talk about entity interfaces, which are always a revolutionary idea, but Salesforce is going to make it reality. A little bit about myself. My name is Mohammad Abrar, but I can just go by Abrar. I've been working on Salesforce for almost a decade. And currently, I'm working as a Salesforce technical architect for PwC. Before we get going, just a quick note. The feature that we are going to talk about today is not yet released. So please always make your purchasing decisions on products and services that are currently available and not what you see here today. So this is the agenda for this session. First, we'll look at the background, why are we talking about entity interfaces, the business use cases where we are facing the problems, pain points, and then we'll dive into what is actually the entity interface and how entity interface can resolve those problems. And then we will dive into, we'll talk about a roadmap of this feature, and then learning resources, and then later, we'll take Q&A. So let's get started. So let me set the scene. So let me take you to the trip back. So we all are familiar with Salesforce objects. So Salesforce objects are database containers that contain data, and as well as the business logic that acts on that data. So in Salesforce, we all are familiar. We have standard objects, which comes out of the box through the Salesforce platform. We have then custom objects, and we have AppExchange objects, which are developed by ISVs. And then later, we have the external objects, which helps you to bring external data into Salesforce. Now, if we take these different objects in Salesforce, and let's take a business use case and kind of a problem at the minute is, let's take a use case of if you want to bring a data from different objects, and those objects are kind of logically similar. So such as you have the product object, which is out of the box through the standard object in Salesforce. We have then custom object, again, coming as kind of like somebody creating a custom object for tracking the products for the KPI perspective, bringing from SAP. Then we have AppExchange jobs. So now let's think about CPQ. Now in CPQ, we have our own custom object called product. And then we are bringing external data source, again, product from SAP, Azure, any other external system. And then what we are trying to do is we're trying to build a report or kind of a custom UI from bringing that data from all these different objects. Now, as of today, you have to actually create a report kind of custom UI through Lightning component or Visualforce or Lightning Web Components, and do 4 different queries to bring that data. Now you can do that, but if you have multiple objects, more than 4 objects, or even multiple objects for standard, custom, AppExchange, kind of logical, that's going to be a difficult situation to handle that from a data perspective as well as from admin perspective. Now let's take another use case where, again, we have 4 different objects: standard, custom, AppExchange, and external objects. Logically similar objects, and we want to implement a validation rule. And that validation rule, we got a requirement which says that we want to implement a validation rule on a standard product object. Now that's good, but if somebody says that we want to implement or replicate a same validation rule on custom object as well as AppExchange and as well as external object. Now the problem is you had to actually create separately on these objects, the same validation rule. Actually, you are replicating the same functionality. So you are not actually reusing the functionality, you are copying the same functionality. So now from a data quality point of view, which is okay, but if you want to build a kind of similar logic, which can be commonly used, that's going to be a problem for objects. Looking at maybe not a big problem, but if you have multiple objects, logical, that's going to be a problem. Now, let's talk about how these problems can be resolved with entity interfaces. Now, entity interfaces are the abstract type of objects, abstract objects. That means the business logic is separated from the data layer. So, such as if you, and the data sources of that entity interface will be a standard object, custom object, AppExchange means managed package object, or external object. As well as we talked about business logic, kind of validation rule. Now, if you, with this entity interface, if you create a business logic on entity interface, it will all these objects will automatically inherit that particular business logic into these objects. So it's going to be a cool feature, isn't it? Because this will be a powerful feature because an entity interface is just kind of a shell, bringing that data all together. And if you implement a business logic entity interface, it's just automatically replicate on all these objects. Isn't it cool? Powerful feature. So now what are we talking about? Are we talking about a new kind of like concept? Not really, because if you come from a different technology such as .NET or Java or other technologies, this kind of concept is already present there. So in .NET, you might be familiar with ORM, interfaces in Java, trace in Scala, and of course, views in databases. So this is not a revolutionary idea from other technologies' perspective, but Salesforce is bringing this revolutionary idea into reality. So remember, we talked about data sources, the standard object, custom, AppExchange, or external objects. Now, from the entity interfaces point of view, you need to remember three different terminologies. One of them is implementer. Those data sources in entity interfaces called as implementers. So it could be standard, custom, AppExchange, or external object. Then, of course, then you have mapping. Now, you have to do the mapping, and that mapping means we're talking about logical layer of the objects, and that fields have to be aligned from source to the entity interface. And union queries. Now, first time in Salesforce, we are going to have a union query in Salesforce Object Framework. This is going to be a game changer for Salesforce Object Framework perspective, which means that we're talking about bringing all those objects data together. When you query one query in entity interface, actually, it will bring and fetch the data from all these different objects. All right, so let's talk about a little bit from a data perspective, where did that idea is coming from. So we're talking about cloud information model. So I'm sure you all are familiar with Customer 360 degree. So when Salesforce was building that, this entity interface came up with that idea. Because in Customer 360, what we're talking about is bringing data from Marketing Cloud, from B2C Commerce Cloud, B2B Commerce Cloud, and other parts of the Salesforce. And they had to do the same, they faced the same problems. and then they bring up this idea of entity interfaces. And then this entity interface, Salesforce is already using it, and actually Salesforce is going to expose this feature to you guys, to us. So cloud information model is bringing that idea together, and then entity interface. So you can see we have implementers, standard object, again, product object, all these are product objects logically. And then you are actually mapping it. An entity interface is kind of a common layer. Then standard object, custom AppExchange, or external objects. All right. Then this is just a kind of a prototype for the entity interfaces. So when entity interfaces will be available, will be released, you will see a new column in the object manager. You will see type, something like this, type column. And in the type column, you will see standard entity interface. So initially, Salesforce will be bringing and expose standard entity interfaces, like any standard Salesforce object. And down below, you will see that you have the different implementers. It could be custom, external, or even standard objects. Now, we talked about field mapping. So this is, again, prototype. So you have sales order, which is entity interface. And the right-hand side, you have the custom order, which is custom order, custom object, standard object, or any external object. And you can see here clearly that you have this different labels, not a problem, but logically same. So you are actually mapping it together. And then actually, when you query a sales order, which is an entity interface, you're actually bringing or querying data from all these different data sources. Great, isn't it? Then we talked about union queries, which is canonical model in cloud information model, which is this is kind of a logical layer. So you can see here we have the entity interface here, which is kind of, when you query it, it actually it queries the union, and union query, which is like bringing data from all these different objects. And from us Salesforce perspective, when you query the data, you don't need to worry about whether I need to query product, custom, standard, or even external object. You just query the entity interface, and it will bring the data for you from all these data sources. Now let's talk about we talked about the cascading logic. So when you create a custom business logic, now initially validation rule will be coming on the entity interface. Now when you will create a validation rule or entity interface, all these data sources will actually inherit that automatically. You don't have to do anything. It will inherit automatically. So that's why Salesforce says that write code once and use everywhere. All right, so let's talk about quickly, let's go back to the scenario. So let's talk about a real scenario, real life scenario. Let's say we have the customer universal containers. They have got a requirement. There are different consultancies working in their Salesforce org, and they have different objects, but logically same object, product. And then XYZ Consulting working on a standard object, product, ABC Consulting, and other consultants with their own objects. But actually, the requirement is we need to show top 10 products from all these data sources. Now, if you think about currently, you had to actually create a custom UI, and you had to think about lots of other considerations and the use cases. But now this entity interface is bringing this revolutionary idea into reality. Is just like point and click and no code required. So no code required, point and click. You will just create the entity interface, and then from entity interface, initially, this feature will be bringing custom report types. You can bring the custom reports. You can create custom reports on the entity interface, and that's it. Everything point and click. All right. So let's do this summary of this particular cool feature here. So Again, this feature is not yet released. This feature, again, safe harbor applies here. This feature will be available or will be coming in summer 20 release. Initially, this feature will be coming with few features as GA and few features as pilot features. So initially, standard entity interface will be coming. In a single entity interface, you could create 5 implementers. So you'll be able to create five implementers per entity interface. And by the way, you don't need to worry about governor limits. So when you query entity interface, it will not query different objects. It will query just one query, which is like really a great point to think about from a governor limits point of view, and also from a performance point of view. Then we have union query, which is combining all these objects together and create a unified kind of UI. And then initially, validation rules will be coming on the entity interface. You will just create a validation rule, and then it will automatically inherit and fire whenever you will load the data from the data loader. When you will create the data from a UI perspective, it will actually fire those triggers. And then you will, of course, custom report types will be coming as well. And of course, this feature doesn't require any code, but that doesn't mean that you can't do anything with the APIs. The entity interface will be available in the API, metadata API, SOAP API, REST API, and it is like any other object in Salesforce. All right, and of course, this feature is not just for the architects or developers. Actually, this feature is very useful for admins, for point and click, no code required. So really powerful tool. So keep an eye on the summer 20 release. So that's gonna be there. All right. So let's talk about a little bit the product roadmap. So we talked about the different implementers. One thing I would really highlight here, polymorphism. Now, multi-object master detail and lookups. Now, let's think about, it's been 20 years of Salesforce. And I think we all are familiar that we can't have a relationship, like a custom object cannot be a master detail in a master relationship. But with entity interface, you can now, because when entity interface will be available, and this feature in the roadmap, again, will be coming, multi-object master data will be available, which means if you have a custom object, and that custom object will have a master detail with the entity interface, and that entity interface has any standard implementer, which means we're talking about account, lead, case, opportunity, any standard object, actually, that will be acted as a detail in a master relationship of that particular custom object. Isn't it a cool, powerful feature? And then, of course, we talked about the business logic. So initially, validation rules will be coming. Apex triggers are there in the roadmap, process flows, and CRUD, of course, CRUD features are there, CRUD permissions are there. And initially, standard entity interfaces will be coming. But later part, later, way ahead in the future, the custom entity interfaces will also be part of the product itself. Okay. So let's talk about the useful resources. So far, we have one particular learning resource, but that's a very powerful, very useful resource. That is, there's a session from Dreamforce last year, where actually this particular feature was introduced. So I would highly recommend go to this link and watch the actual demo from last year Dreamforce. And of course, I would mention the product team. So I would highly recommend reach out to them with any questions, any feedback, any use cases you could share with them. please do share. And I would like to mention here George, because George was a super helpful for me to understand this particular feature with all the features of this particular feature, and then bringing all this session together. So really thanks to George and all these guys who are really helpful. So, and yes, if you are watching still online, I would highly recommend go to this link and then share your use cases and ideas if you have so far about this feature. And of course, for the naming perspective as well, whether do you think like entity interface is not a good name, then share your idea for that as well. Okay, with that, I think we can take a few questions from the audience here, and I think from online as well. And by the way, you can always reach out to me on via Twitter and as well as by the LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes, please.
Will it apply to big objects?
Yes. So the question, I'll repeat the question for the viewers online there. So the question is, the implementers we have at the moment is standard object, custom object, AppExchange, again, custom object, managed package object, and as well as external object. So the question is whether the big objects is in the plan. So not yet in the plan, but most likely in the future, later part, not soon. All right. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. So will it be supported by package XML for SFDX, or
Yes. So very good question. So I believe yes, because it will be available in the metadata API. So I presume, again, safe harbor applies here, that it comes as normal entity in Salesforce. So it means that it should be available, and it will be available in the metadata API as well.
And do you think we can convert, from source code to metadata and metadata to source code?
So the question is, I believe you're talking about the old version of the source code into the new version of the source SFDX. I can't say anything at the moment because that's not released yet. But I would say one thing, which is, if the object is available in the API, in the metadata API, that means that you can play with it, and you can maybe do something to convert it into the SFDX version.
And let me understand more about this entity object.
Yes.
If it's going to act like a normal object.
Normal object, yes.
But it's an interface, so can it create fields on it?
Correct, yes. So you have seen the prototype. So yes, take it as any object in Salesforce.
And the entity is going to be mastered. The standard object is going to be different, right?
So entity interface is just an abstract layer, and then the standard custom object, AppExchange, and the external objects will be kind of data sources for that particular objects. So actually, data is still there in those main objects, but this entity interface kind of acting as an abstract layer, so bringing all these data together, kind of unified UI.
So, but you mentioned about.
So that's polymorphism. That will be later part in the future in the roadmap, and that will be if you have a custom object. And I believe that will be with the custom entity interfaces, not the standard entity interfaces. So if you create a custom entity interface relationship with the kind of like a master detail with the entity interface and custom object, and any implementer, one of them is standard entity, that means that you are actually acting as a master detail, and a standard object will be detail, and that custom object will be the master object of that master detail relationship. Yep, but that will be a powerful feature because so far we are not able to make any standard object as detail in the master detail relationship, right?
Yeah, so that's why in formula fields, when you have master detail.
Yes. Yes, you can, but it will be, yes, yep. All right, so with that, well, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining people who are online. And yeah, please reach out to me via Twitter, LinkedIn, and happy to take questions. Thank you. Thanks.
Coacto are a Salesforce implementation company with over 18 years' experience working with Salesforce. With our expertise in Salesforce, supply chain, and ERP projects, we're here to support customers and partners in all stages of their implementation. We have a track record of success helping organizations to realize their Salesforce vision. Coact with us to make Salesforce work for you or your customers. Coacto, we realize your Salesforce vision.